Good morning to you all. Joining us from around the UK, Australia, Austria, Ireland, Italy, Malaysia, Mexico, Taiwan, and the United States of America. Welcome to our first Disability Arts Social Prescribing webinar to preserve our health and well-being, our brain health. It is everyone's human right to participate in the community, but for people living with a disability and experiencing early symptoms of a dementia, this can be a challenge. So it is truly splendid on this 10th anniversary of Disability Rights UK to be opening the conversation on a compelling range of disability arts that can help to preserve our brain health. Our webinar chair, Kamran Mallick, Disability Rights Chief Executive, has just been rushed to hospital, and we do wish him the very best and most comfortable recovery. We are immensely grateful to Dr. Rashmi Becker, an expert in disability policy and strategy, for stepping into the breach. Some 10 million people around the world are expected to be diagnosed with a dementia this year, their natural fears compounded by stigma. Creating and being seen to participate in artistic endeavour can transform their despair to desire. I speak on behalf of Arts for Dementia, the UK charity specialising in arts workshop practice to help re-energise and inspire individuals and carers to override symptoms of early stage dementia, with a website to which you can signpost your arts opportunities for all stages of dementia in the community by art form, virtual accessibility, dementia need, postcode, and more. The growing understanding we share today is that thanks to social prescribing, GPs referring patients for personal appointments with link workers for much valued non-clinical support, their patients with and without disabilities can be empowered from the onset of symptoms of a potential dementia to take up inclusive disability arts to reinvigorate their lives. Social prescribing connects patients to local arts programs of individual and exciting interest, and in choosing to participate, whether peri or post-diagnosis, they are taking enjoyably constructive action to preserve their brain health. Joining social arts groups of personal cultural interest through social prescribing empowers people to preserve their sense of well-being, their cultural identity, achievement, and resilience in the community for years longer. Sharing imaginative ideas, making music, performing, dancing, creating together helps modify risk factors for dementia and nurture resilience for person and carer living with both dementia and disability. Our aim through these webinars is to raise awareness of the linkability of patients to the brilliant practice such as we shall hear today from our speakers. Dr. Michelle Howarth, the National Social Prescribing Network Lead on Nursing. Dr. Lucy Burke, Principal Lecturer at the Centre for Culture and Disability Studies at Liverpool Hope University. Dr. Rashmi Becker, founder of Step Change Studios, London, and expert in policy and strategy, our chair today. Nabil Shaman, actor, activist, co-founder of Grey Theatre for Disabled People. Fleur Derbyshire-Fox, Director of Engagement, English National Ballet, in today's times with Parkinson, with Paxman, with Jeremy Paxman. And she will present Dance for Parkinson's, which he was demonstrating. William Ogden, Trustee Director of Decibels, inspiring and enabling deaf people to make music. Rebecca McGuinness, Senior Managing Editor for Accessibility at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, presents a range of programs for the disabled. Farah Syed, artist, educator, colour energy specialist, astonished me at the Royal Society of Arts by her visual arts approach, enabling the blind and visually impaired to feel and sense colour. Dr. Beverly Dogood, founder of Insight Mind, Poetry for the Visually Impaired, shares her approach to mindful poetry for the visually impaired, touching also on cultural diversity. Jan Bert van den Berg, Director of Artlick Edinburgh and the Lothians, explains Artlig's thoughtful, multi-sensual, multi-engaging approach to disability arts. And finally, Ruth Faby, Director of Disability Arts Cymru, trained in drama and founded the Disability Arts Festival, Dada Fest. I should like to express my thanks, to our thanks, I should say, to the 3 speakers who could not in the event make the date, yet kindly recorded contributions, and to our involved BSL interpreters, and to Nigel Franklin of Arts for Dementia, who is really making the smooth running of this webinar possible. And very much, of course, to thank our chair, Rashmi Becker. Each speaker will talk for 5 minutes on their specialism or approach to disability arts, after which Rashmi will chair the speaker debate, looking at issues arising from their talks. One thought I should like to share surrounds stigma. Some people with early symptoms of dementia, as well as natural fears, can feel a sense of shame. And in preparation for this webinar, I sense that disabled people are actually proud to identify as such. Look, for example, at the Paralympic Games. And I wonder whether the additional challenge of potential dementia, stigma may be less of a worry than actually coping with symptoms. Still a challenge. Interesting to know, perhaps, in the debate. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. We shall also upload a transcript with resource links, so do all feel free to add your own resources to the chat. And our Disability Arts for Brain Health webinar today is in the very fine hands of our noble chair, Dr. Rashmi Becker, who literally came in at the very last minute. Rashmi, thank you very much. Oh, actually, before I do hand over to Rashmi, I will read you Kamran's introduction, because Kamran sent it from hospital. I am really sorry not to be there today. I was looking forward to listening to all the wonderful speakers lined up and take part in the conversation. Disability Rights UK is a disabled people-led organisation. Our work is rights and justice-based, and we are working with other organisations and individuals to bring about a truly inclusive society, one where disabled people are supported, listened to and valued. Our rich diversity as a community is our strength as we bring unique perspective through our lived experience. We talk about disabled people and those with long-term health conditions because everyone does not identify themselves as a disabled person. However, often the experience is the same. Someone with a condition such as dementia may not think that they are a disabled person. They may see it as an illness or perhaps age-related. What matters is that all of us experience barriers. These barriers are part of the social construct, the way we structure our communities, places of education and work, social activities to the narratives written about us. If we can start to remove the barriers, that, I would ask, are we still disabled people? Yes, we have various conditions, illnesses, disabilities, but those in themselves don't make us disabled. The barriers do. The arts has a significant role to play in changing narratives, in creating inclusive practices and environments that values our human difference. By doing so, we are better as a society. Inclusive thinking, planning, and performing is the world I want to see. I certainly don't have the answers, but working together, we can move in that direction. The saying in our disabled community of nothing about us without us, which actually also applies to dementia, is something we should always remember. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session today. Now, he was going to talk about the social model of disability. I have a feeling that is going to, he has covered that, while not actually referring to the social model.
Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are in the world. And as Veronica said, I'm Dr. Rashmi Becker. I'm the founder of Step Change Studios, but I also have over 25 years, I think it is now, losing count, experience working in government, social policy, disability policy, the care sector, education and the arts, amongst other things. So I'm looking forward to hosting today. Thank you very much for joining us. Really excited about the discussion and looking forward to hearing everyone's views. Each speaker has 5 minutes, so if you could please try your best to stick to that time. Veronica, if you could sort of come in, if depending on if we are overrunning. And then I'm looking forward to us having an exchange and debate after everyone has spoken. So I will introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Michelle Howarth, who is the lead in National Social Prescribing Network Special Interest Group in Nursing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've been asked to kind of set the scene a bit and talk about social prescribing and what that means, and particularly what it means for people with disabilities. So I'm hoping to kind of put some context around today, and I'll be around for the panel at the end for any questions, and obviously Veronica will share these the slides later on. So what is social prescribing then? There's a lot of definitions around, but essentially it's a means of enabling GPs and other frontline health professionals to refer patients to a link worker, to provide them with a wellbeing conversation about what matters to them, not what's the matter with them. So it kind of turns this medical model on its head, during which they can learn about the possibilities for themselves and design their own kind of personalised solutions. The important thing here is that that link worker has a very personalised conversation, a wellbeing conversation with that individual. Not everybody is referred, that people are only referred if it's for a non-clinical reason. And it's estimated that as about 30% of GP appointments now are made unnecessarily for a non-clinical reason. You can self-refer to different organisations, but for a social prescription to work, there has to be that referral pathway. So the link worker or community connectors works alongside a number of different other roles, such as the health and wellbeing coach and care coordinators, and is embedded within that multidisciplinary team. So they work alongside the GP, advanced practitioners, the voluntary services, etc. Typically, a link worker might originate from the area that they're prescribing to, and they will have asset mapped all the different opportunities within that particular area. So the organisations that I've worked with in Salford, for example, started off a number of years ago with 5 community connectors. They were all born and raised in Salford. They knew that area like the back of their hand, and they could refer very quickly somebody to an intervention. I think there's now 16 of them. That kind of demonstrates the explosion of link workers and community connectors that we've had over the past couple of years. So the kinds of things that they might send them for are arts-based movements, drama, exercise, yoga, gardening groups, knit and natter groups, you name it. All of these lovely assets that are there in the community that build on somebody's strengths rather than their deficits. We know there's a lot of social prescribing ongoing across the United Kingdom. It has tried to be mapped, but because of the uniqueness of the interventions, it's really difficult to pinpoint where everything is taking place. If we take, for example, Greater Manchester, there are over 17,000 VCSE organisations operating in Greater Manchester alone, of which 72% or thereabouts are very small organisations with less than £1,000 a year income, right the way through to larger organisations such as Macmillan, Age Concern, 42nd Street, and all of those amazing organisations. And so the referral pathway often originates through the GP, through the link worker, out into one of those assets within the community. There are different models of social prescribing. There's social prescribing light, and this is based on Richard Kimberley's work, where somebody might recognise that someone's going to a GP a lot, and it might be somebody in the reception area goes, well, have you, you're coming in a lot for social isolation. Have you thought about going to this local group? And that's just a simple signposting. There's a medium prescription where a GP or health professional may have a wellbeing conversation And that might be around a medical reason that's related to a condition. So, for example, weight management as part of management of a long-term type 2 diabetes. And they might refer to Weight Watchers or to a physical activity supporter. And then the holistic approach, which is what we all try and aim towards, is where the link work has a wellbeing conversation with the individual. They follow that individual up. They meet up with up 8 times with that individual. They literally take them to where the intervention and hold their hand. So it's been very effective. There's quite a lot of evidence about the referral processes, about the impact. We now have specialist pathways emerging. We have a National Academy for Social Prescribing that was launched in October 2019 or 2020, I think. We have specialist pathways for children and young people, people with mental health, and there are emerging pathways specifically for people with learning disabilities. And those are social prescribing services for patients who have a learning disability. And that might mean helping them to find things in the local area that can help their physical, mental health and well-being, to help them feel happier and healthier. We even have green social prescribing now, where nature-based interventions are promoted, being outdoors, getting involved, allotment groups, etc. So, to recap then, how a social prescription can help you. It's used for non-clinical reasons. It's never used for a clinical issue. The GP or health professional will always support a clinical issue. It's about helping you to find things to do in your local area that can impact your physical, mental health and well-being, making you feel happier, healthier, more connected with the community. They can support annual health checks. They can help complete goals, health action plans, etc. They have questions if you're worried or concerned, and can help to join groups, voluntary organisations, prepare for employment, and enabling people to meet others in a safe and encouraging way. So I would encourage everyone, if they're interested, to find out more about the local prescribing schemes. There are many across the country. They are all very different, but they all follow the same kind of referral pathway. So I think I've probably taken up my 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. And really, I think that the point about community and local is very interesting and something we might pick up on later. I'm going to go straight on to introducing our next speaker, which I believe is a recording from Dr. Lucy Burke, who is a principal lecturer, the Centre for Culture and Disability Studies at Liverpool Hope University.
Sorry that I can't be with you all in person today, and I'm very grateful to Veronica for giving me the opportunity to record my presentation, and for extending an invitation to me to speak today about arts, disability and dementia. My research explores the ways in which we think about and portray forms of cognitive difference and cognitive impairment. For instance, learning disability, autism and dementia in life writing, literature and film. And I've also worked with people with dementia and learning disabled and autistic young people, and artists and performers on a range of projects, including most recently the Arts Council funded project Transforming Leadership with Access All Areas, Theatre Company and Disability Arts Online. So there is a paucity of research on the role of the arts in the early stages of a dementia diagnosis in relationship to the experiences of people living with specific impairments. Just thinking about learning disability, we know, for instance, that people with Down syndrome are at particular risk of early onset Alzheimer's, and that the prevalence of dementia in people over 60 is 2 to 3 times greater in learning disabled people. However, there's very little sustained research currently that focuses on the ways in which arts-based interventions might be utilised in this specific context. There's a pressing need to do this work, although in saying that, I feel strongly that we need to find new ways of evaluating arts-based interventions that avoid reducing outcomes to measurements and to ways of measuring outcomes that often exclude or fail to capture disabled people's experiences. I think there's another discussion to be had too about the use of measurements full stop in relationship to the arts and what they might contribute, what and how they might contribute to people's lives, but that's for another day. However, I would argue that insights from critical and cultural disability studies and creative projects with and by learning disabled people have a very significant role to play in reorienting some of the ways in which we tend to think about dementia and what it means to have a diagnosis, and indeed in a broader sense what it means to be a human. Creative and critical work that explores the experiences of people whose differences are strong, in other words, whose difference is marked by atypical forms of communication, different ways of interacting socially, and some different sensory experiences, all of which we see in autistic people and learning disabled people often, offers us a very important insights into the diverse ways in which people exist in the world, and about what matters and what we think makes a meaningful life. For example, conventionally in dementia studies, much is made of the centrality of memory to identity and to the importance of telling a story. However, for lots of learning disabled people, and particularly those who may not use language in a typical way, they might not express a narrative identity according to the traditions of autobiography, or express a sense of self via memory work. However, one of the things that emerges very strongly in the kind of work I've done is that expressions of selfhood can be poetic rather than narrative, captured in moments or exchanges, in beautiful fragments of language, in the movement of bodies and the rhythms of our daily rituals. For people who require other people to live and to thrive, recognition of our interdependence, mutuality and interconnection, shared meaning making, is essential, and at its very best, there is a creativity at the heart of care and caring, a kind of creative, imaginative interaction with the world. And, you know, everyday creativity is expressed in the songs we might sing together, the rhymes we make up, the rhythms we beat, the value we place on these moments of connection, problem solving, working together to create spaces in a world which is fundamentally inhospitable to particular, some groups of people. And what's important is this insight dislodges the highly individuated models of personhood that are deeply entangled with the fear of dementia and the fear of the losses that it might bring. And they point to other ways of understanding selfhood and human value. The understanding of dementia as a disability or via the lens of disability activism is therefore not simply about bringing social model thinking to our identification of environmental, physical, attitudinal and communication barriers, although this is obviously very important. It's also about appreciating and valuing different ways of being in the world and the new knowledges that they provide us with. I need to emphasize that in saying all this, what I'm not trying, it's not an attempt or an endeavor to elide learning disability and dementia. I think we're talking about very different sort of conditions and experiences, but to argue that recognition of the value of difference and that sort of drawing on the sort of on the creative and collaborative nature of care and life, with living with particular kinds of differences, in its very something we need to hold on to and extend to our thinking about dementia today, and about the ways sort of shared practices like the arts might be used to enhance people's lives and to enable people to flourish, particularly through a difficult diagnosis. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really interesting from Lucy, and it's a shame she couldn't be with us. Some interesting points there around the social model and dependence. as Veronica said, I was asked to chair maybe sort of 20 minutes before the session. So I'm wearing two hats at the moment. And I believe I'll be introducing myself next as the founder of Step Change Studios. I had written a sort of mini intro as well as part of the chair. So I'm just going to put those two bits together because they do follow on from each other. So as mentioned, I'm the founder of Step Change Studios, which is an inclusive dance company that supports disabled people to dance. We support people from all ages and abilities, from 2 to 102, people with physical, mental and sensory impairments. I'm currently in the US at the moment doing a little bit of research. I'm in New York, but normally I am based in London. Just a bit of framing as well, because in case there are people taking part that may not know some of the terminology and things like social model. So, you know, it's funny because disability is often talked about as a sort of in minority terms. But, you know, 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. And I know the figure is similar in the US. You know, in the US, there's 61 million people who have a disability. And again, we use different terminology. I think in the UK, we tend to say disabled people. In the States, we tend to say people with disability. So I'm not going to get hung up on terminology here, but just in case you hear different terms being used. And I think, you know, in my background, I also have a PhD which focused on intellectual disabilities, and I did a lot of work around the social model. And over our history, our understanding of disability has changed. So, you know, we are less likely now to think of it in terms of just the medical impact of having a disability. We have the term social model, and that thinking is that it's not just the condition of having a disability, it's our environment, it's the social conditions around us that actually are disabling, whether that's housing, whether that's transport, whether that's our working environment. That can be physical challenges, it can be social attitudes and so on. And also, you know, as Lucy referenced, our thinking is changing as well, because there is a stigma around dependence. And yet most of us will have dependencies at some point in our lives. Most of us will be carers or be cared for at some point in our life. And so again, even the thinking around this social model is changing, because there is greater recognition that this idea, this sort of what we valued in life, it's focused on independence, but actually there's growing recognition of the importance of interdependence. And actually we're all, you know, reliant on each other. And I'll just sort of leave that, and it might be something we come back to later. And I think the last point I make before I mention a little bit about Step Change Studios is also greater recognition of disabled people's rights, but also seeing much better self-advocacy. So not just seeing disabled people as sort of vulnerable or at risk and using these sort of that sort of language that we have in the past, and seeing much more leadership and representation. But at the same time, there are still challenges, and there are still lots of issues concerning people that may lack mental capacity. We're talking about dementia today, people who might be non-verbal or not able to self-advocate. And at Step Change Studios, we work a lot with people with complex disabilities and who are non-verbal and who lack mental capacity. The role of the arts is absolutely amazing in terms of people's quality of life. And I think, you know, we'll be preaching a little bit to the choir here today with some of the speakers that we have, but there's so much research out there, and, you know, 5 minutes isn't enough to sort of go into it, but there is so much evidence showing the positive impact of the arts and also physical activity on health and well-being, on physical health and mental health. You'll hear about those from colleagues, I'm sure, and it's everything from the obvious physical benefits, but also the importance of connection, helping tackle social isolation, helping with things like concentration. We work with people with behavioral challenges in terms of severe autism, and it can help manage people's behaviors and anxiety, self-injurious behavior, the list goes on. Our work at Step Change Studios, I founded as Step Change Studios because for a lot of reasons, really. I have a brother, and I'm guardian to my older brother who has severe autism. He is nonverbal. He lacks mental capacity. And growing up, music, movement has been a really important way for us to connect. And it's been really important in helping manage his self-interest behavior and his anxieties. And I felt there weren't enough opportunities where I was for disabled people to participate in dance. So I set up Step Change Studios, and as I say, we provide a whole range of dance. So we provide lots of different genres, but we work in a wide variety of settings. We work at very grassroots level in the community, but we also create professional work, creating a platform for professional artists that don't often have an opportunity to have their talent showcased. We have delivered and continue to deliver a whole range of innovative programs. Blind ballroom, for example. We run, through COVID, particularly because of the challenges, we've started also to look at intersection. So as well as disability, the intersection, for example, between race and disability. So during COVID, we ran a really innovative program supporting people with disabilities from a South Asian background, because both disabled people and people from Black and Asian backgrounds were disproportionately impacted. So we developed all sorts of online dance programs, in-person programs when we could emerge from COVID. But the third point, which is really, really important, that as well as the delivery, is the sort of advocacy side in trying to improve better practice in the sectors that we engage with. So, for example, the care sector, and trying to work with care providers to recognise the value of the arts and physical activity in the lives of people they support, working with the dance and the sports sectors to recognise and improve the support that they can give both to participants, but also in improving inclusive practice amongst professionals, and also influencing policy and making sure that policy, when it comes to inclusive practice again and creating opportunities, isn't a tick box and it isn't an add-on, but it's integral to formulating policy. And lastly, you know, we work, and again, you've already heard this, and I'm sure you'll hear it more, that it's really for a lot of disabled people and the adults we meet, they've spent their lives being told what they can't do rather than what they can. And this can impact a lot of psychological barriers when it comes to feeling like they belong, that they can contribute, and that they have a place in dance. And there's a whole world of dance when it comes to the body and how you should look, etc., which again is almost a separate conversation. But you know, in trying to enter that space, they can feel stigmatized. So again, a lot of our work focuses on empowering and supporting disabled people, both as artists, but also to represent what they want and the sort of environment that they want to see, and the sort of behaviors that they want to, the behavioral change they want to see when it comes to feeling like they can be in that space and that they can benefit from everything that the arts has to offer. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is, it's my pleasure to introduce Nabil Sharman, who is an actor, activist, and co-founder of Grey Theatre for Disabled People.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, jolly good. First thing, I'm not Nabil Sharman. Shaman or shaman is a joke on my part in creating my email address, which is that doesn't have my real name. It's Shaman Nahagwe, which is to do with my heritage. My name is Nabil Shaban, actually, and also it's grey eye, we pronounced it as Grey Eye, although it could be pronounced Grey Theatre Company. But we don't speak Greek. I've never met any Greek who could enlighten me as to how you say the name of the three sisters who were the inspiration for the name Grey Eye. They were cousins of the Gorgons, and why we chose them as the name for the theatre company, partly because we were interested in mythology, and the purpose of the founding of the company was to break up the myths, destroy the myths surrounding disability in every respect. So we focus on the misconceptions and mythologies regarding handicap, cripples, disabled people, the behindered, as described in Germany. And we toyed with various ideas for Greek names for the theatre company. One was like Cyclops, didn't quite think that worked. Another was Centaur, half horse, half human. And actually the one that I felt was perfect, and I didn't know their name at the time, I just knew them as three sisters who had one eye between them. And I thought, well, there's a very good analogy of being, quite disabled by only having one eye between them, but also it represents the idea of cooperating, solidarity, being together, sharing what we've got in order to advance our situation. But anyway, the story of the Gorgons and the Grey Eye was such that Perseus, who was out to kill the Gorgons, out to kill Medusa, could only get information about where they were, how to do it, by approaching their cousins, the Grey Eye. He double crossed them in the end, and didn't help the Grey Eye at all. But that's another story. Now, why did Grey Eye come into being? Why did Richard Tomlinson, my co-founder, who sadly is dead, and I create Grey Eye? Well, from my point of view, it was because I wanted to be an actor, pure and simple. And back in the 60s and 70s, the opportunities for disabled people to be actors didn't exist, unless you were in an amateur dramatic group, maybe, or at school. But it's even then, as a disabled person, it was very hard, almost impossible, to get a local Amdram to consider you to be part of their group. And at the age of 16 and 69, I wrote to nearly every drama school I could think of and said, I'm in a wheelchair, but I want to be an actor. And they basically told me to get stuffed, or maybe form your own group, play reading sessions. And one suggested that I got in touch with the only person in Britain that we knew of who was a disabled performer, a singer, comic writer called Michael Flanders. They said, write to him, ask him how he got going and get some advice from him. And I did. And his best advice was the only way you're going to do it is to create your own opportunities. Write your own material. Write stuff that the public would be interested in hearing about or seeing, and make sure you give yourself the best roles. So that's basically how Grey Eye was created, from this very good advice. Now, I'm someone with a very vivid imagination. I've always been accused of that. That is often an excuse for telling me I'm a liar, because of my vivid imagination. But I thought that television back in the 50s and 60s, because I was in a hospital for disabled children for 6 years, and the television and the radio was my mother and father in many ways. And I wanted to be like those people I saw on television. So when I saw Roy Rogers or Richard the Lionheart or William Tell, Robin Hood, etc., I thought, that's how I can escape from my condition. I can become what they are. Now, I knew they weren't real. I knew that they were people who were pretending. And that was a great excuse for me to think that I can live in a pretend world and be something that I know I'm not, but at least I can pretend at it. And that, in a way, was what inspired me to try to become an actor. But of course, it wasn't easy, as I've just explained. And we had to create our own opportunities to do that. The thing about, the thing about art as a therapy is I think that art is a therapy for everyone. Well, because everyone is searching for themselves, searching to find out who they are, where is their position in the world, where is their position with themselves. And many of our problems are created because we don't know enough about ourselves. And I was thinking about that the other day and thought, well, this is what the Greeks are talking about, the Socratic maxim, which people quote, although actually it didn't belong to Socrates. It's just a phrase found on the Delphic oracle, know thyself. And this is the thing about the art. That's the means by which a person can to discover themselves and find out what their worth is and know how they can present themselves to the world, express themselves. Now, along with that idea of know thyself, there's also what Jesus is allegedly said to have said, physician, know thyself, or I should say, physician, heal thyself. And you can put the two together by saying, artist, with your work, you can know thyself and thus heal yourself. And that is how I regard the whole idea of art therapy, because it's not a specialist area. It's something that affects every single person who wants to be creative, who wants to find out who they are. And, every artist is struggling to find out who they are, why they are. Whether it happens to be Van Gogh or Dali or Frida Kahlo, Beethoven, they are all struggling human beings. They're all people with some kind of soul hurt in many ways, partly perhaps because they don't feel like they belong in this world, that they are perhaps alienated from themselves and from the universe. And so they need to find a way in which they can find themselves so that they can then heal themselves. And this is pertinent, obviously, with regards anyone who has, on the onset of dementia, because that's when you're starting to really forget who you are. That's when you are getting lost in a world where your memory is fading. And it's our memory that enables us to know who we are. Without the memory, we won't know who we are. And memory is one of the first casualties, I think, of onset of brain damage, which then brings about dementia. So it's important that we try to be artists when we feel we are losing ourselves, so that we know, so we can rediscover who we are. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nabil. Very particularly interesting reflections around sense of self. And again, I hope we can get to that in the discussion. I'm going to move on to, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who has her name lovelyly presented in the box, which is Fleur Derbyshire-Fox from the English National Ballet. Nice to see you, Fleur.
Thank you. Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. That was wonderful, Nabil. I was really touched by those words. They're so meaningful. And although I've written some things I wanted to talk about, you've made me think about why Dance for Parkinson's. And Dance for Parkinson's, I felt very passionate about starting this program for English National Ballet because my uncle was living with Parkinson's and his world was getting a lot smaller, and he was feeling very isolated. So Parkinson's, affects 145,000 people in the UK. Many people develop the symptoms after the age of 65, but thousands of people are living with Parkinson's are still of working age. And Dance for Parkinson's is a dance and cultural program that supports people to manage their symptoms, but fundamentally it's about being in the moment. When you enter English National Ballet, you are a dancer. You leave Mr. Parkinson's outside and you express yourself and the beauty of your movement, and everything is about what you can do in that moment. And that's very special connectivity with others, that group motivation in the class. We have very beautiful musicians. So the music and the movement together is a driving force for people living with Parkinson's to be expressive dancers and to feel empowered. And we challenge the public perception of Parkinson's and about living well with Parkinson's into a more expressive part of your life and what you can contribute and co-create. I'm going to talk for a little bit and then I'm going to show you 1 minute of a film to finish. I was going to do it the other way around, but now I'm swapping back. So Dance for Parkinson's, we scaled up the program. So I'm going to talk a bit about social prescribing. We scaled it up over 4 years and it's delivered through affiliated hub partners, very varied hub partners. So we've got a dance agency, Dance East, National Dance Company of Wales, Oxford City Council, and Merseyside Dance Initiative. And to supplement in person and to widen our reach, we also have a national online Dance for Parkinson's offer. And the programme is underpinned by research from University of Roehampton, Dr. Sarah Houston, and the findings of this 3-year mixed methods research suggested positive outcomes such as helping people with Parkinson's to stay motivated and maintain an active lifestyle physically and socially. Well, the social element is so important. And when you're living with Parkinson's at whatever stage, it is that social connection. And if you're living with Parkinson's at stage 3, that is when there is a slow cognitive decline with memory, mood, behavioural problems, processing information, and that's when dementias may set in and there may be indicators there. So we need to provide this very caring and nurturing environment, but also challenging and fun and joyous. So dance provides a meaningful and stimulating activity in that supported environment, enabling our dancers to feel more capable, certain about the future, despite their symptoms, and reduce that interference of symptoms in daily living. Now, the West London Clinical Commissioning Group actually commissioned Dance for Parkinson's under their older people's portfolio. in 2016-17, when the company was based in West London, and we've since moved to East London. And the reason why they commissioned it was because of the opportunities it provided for personal expression, recognising social interaction and peer support that people living with Parkinson's might otherwise lack. And they also felt that the project helped fill a gap in provision for post-diagnosis support, especially for older adults in stage 2 and 3, as clinically described symptoms. So from the CCG commissioning, we are now part of a study, a major study with King's College London, funded by the Wellcome Trust, which is, the acronym is SHAPER. I've got a slide with these links which can be circulated. And this study will assess the effectiveness and implementation of known arts in health interventions by scaling up and embedding them across King's Health partners, making the case for NHS clinical commissioning groups to socially prescribe and fund these programmes. Now, the study aims also to evidence how the arts can enhance health and well-being in larger cohorts than has previously been possible. So the end game would be that everyone at the point of diagnosis may be offered a 12 weekly sessions of Dance for Parkinson's. And in 12 weeks, there's a real journey. And it's not just the dancing and the music, it's also about attending cultural activities, having other artists coming in and having a performance at the end of those 12 weeks. And it would be provided for people of all ages, with all groups 1, 2 and 3 of mild, moderate and severe symptoms. Our ambassador, Alan Ferret, I'm just going to a little quote from him. So, going to English National Ballet classes has changed my life. The atmosphere is more like a club where everyone is upbeat and happy. I couldn't do without it. When I'm at English National Ballet, I am a dancer and I leave Mr. Parkinson's outside the door. And that's really what we're about. And it is about our dancers and our ambassadors with lived experience shaping our programme and evolving this programme.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you so much. I am going to introduce our next speaker.
My name is William Ogden, and because I know that some of you have come from international as well, I know the American Sign Language, which is my name is W-I-L-L, Will. So I'm profoundly deaf and I'm partially blind as well in my right eye. And today I have been asked, and should say a big thank you to Veronica for allowing me to be part of this fantastic webinar today. And I must say that all the speakers that's been coming here today have been so inspirational and fantastic to be able to hear what they do as well. And it's obviously inspired me even more so to continue with the work that I'm doing at the moment. So I should say I'm following a script here because I am also conscious of the time. So I'm going to try my best to keep it to 5 minutes. So as someone who is profoundly deaf, I have always used my personal experience to make a positive difference to the lives of the deaf community in the UK. And we always have love for the arts in general, whether if it's theatre, comedy, music, festivals or exhibitions. And the word inclusivity and diversity is being thrown around a lot these days. And I think there was a rapper called Stormzy, trying to keep it relevant, who said it's not a buzzword. And even though that was such a short sentence, it was really impactful because it isn't a buzzword. It's always going to be around. And we are continually having to fight sometimes for that to be provided or implemented, as they say, for the deaf community. So with that in mind, at the moment, I'm cooperating and you know, advising a variety of different organisations, you know, recommending positive working practices to be put in place, because they need to be able to embrace the diversity and inclusive world that we live in today, in the UK and outside the UK. And I work with Performance Interpreting, and they provide interpreters to be provided at music festivals, you know, gigs. Wembley Arena, I know, has got a permanent contract with them to have every show to be interpreted, and we were part of that, to be able to fight with many different organisations to be able to get them to get the resources to be able to put them in place, because deaf people love music just like they would do with anyone else. And just on that note, I am a musician myself, and I was fortunate to have learnt to play the electric guitar, because I have a cochlear implant that enhances for me to be able to pick up on the musical notes. And I had the opportunity to support Mr. Paul Weller, who used to be a guy from the Jam, who I'm sure you may have heard of, who was also trying to get more awareness that deaf people can be able to do anything. And you're probably thinking, oh, why have you mentioned that? I work for Decibels, and apologies if I'm going off point. Decibels is a charity that I feel strong about, because we are currently, for example, overseeing a project where we're going to Barbados, in line with American as well as British musicians, to be able to give an opportunity for deaf young adults, older adults, adults living with dementia, and as well as young children who are all profoundly deaf or deafened, to be able to use music as a tool to communicate to one another. And music is such a powerful tool, and like Nabil was saying earlier, which I feel really strongly about what he said, it connects all of us together, and we are all artists in our own right. And you may be asking, does it take extensive specialist knowledge to include people who are deaf, you know, to be able to make music? And the answer is no, because it doesn't take much of an adjustment. You know, simple steps such as, you know, tapping deaf people on the shoulder to get their attention, or, you know, flicking the lights on and off if you can't touch them, you know, demonstrates just how important it is visually as well as connectively that they can be able to learn how to play a music instrument. And, you know, even learning some basic sign language as well, you know, such as playing notes from A to G, also engages deaf people to be able to memorize as well as play the music instrument. Now, talking about memory, the reason why that's also such a key word for the deaf community is because I have a very lovely friend of mine who's called Rose Aileen Ellis, who's deaf herself, and she's been on a show called Strictly Come Dancing. And Strictly Come Dancing is a bit like Dancing with the Stars for our American viewers. So it's a show about demonstrating your dancing skills. And Rose very famously won it, and she has said that she memorizes all the feel of the beat, and to be able to feel the music through how she expresses herself through the arts of music. And it just comes to show that we can do anything, the deaf community, but it is the society that disables us from stopping ourselves from being given these opportunities. So I just want to just finish off by saying, you know, that I'm hoping that I have shown you a range of what we can do as individuals and what we try and do to get ourselves out there. But sometimes we just have to just keep fighting to be able to hope that people will start to accept that deaf people can be able to do anything. And yes, I'm just going to finish there. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to me. And I've been quite nervous today, so sorry if I'm being off the point. And thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Will. And no, you didn't come across as nervous at all. That was very good. Thank you so much. And really interesting words around advocacy and empowerment. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Rebecca McGuinness, who is the Senior Managing Educator for Accessibility at the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Oh, you're down the road from me. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I think I will try to share my screen, and if that doesn't work, I don't have to. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, that's working.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with this this amazing group of people. I want to talk to all of you after the the webinar today, and on an ongoing basis, really. I thought I would first just set the scene, let you know a little bit about what I do and what with my team at the Met. We are a team called Access, or sometimes Accessibility. We're based in the education department at the Met, but we have a remit that crosses the museum. So we develop programs that are tailored for people with specific disabilities, and partner with organizations, disability and community organizations. But we also collaborate with others on designing programs that are inclusive for all audiences. And then we act as kind of internal advisors on accessibility and inclusion throughout the museum. And we also work to center to make more visible representation of disability throughout the museum, and kind of disability justice in the arts, really, in terms of staff and also interpretation. So just moving to the programs, our programs take many forms. Some are scheduled, they happen on a regular basis, people sign up for them, or some people just drop in to. There are those partnerships I mentioned, and then we also develop tours and programs throughout the city at different sites for groups and individuals with disabilities. So some of the kind of principles, some of the things that we consider when we're designing our programs. We're very conscious of offering choice, right? Different ways for people to participate, whether within a program or across the options. People might just want to visit the museum independently, or participate in a particular program for particular audiences. So another thing that's very important is this idea of challenging perceptions and expectations. So Fleur mentioned that in relation to Parkinson's, challenging what people might expect to do or want to do in a particular context. We also want to connect people to art and to each other through the experiences that we offer and create. And those experiences are really kind of co-created and become a community with the programs that we devise. We value and center disability perspectives and the experience of disabled people. And I think that's a really important way of justification, if you like, for programs that are tailored for particular audiences, to have this co-created space where disability is the disability experience is central. And others have mentioned how that kind of co-creation and interdependence, mutual meaning, kind of collective meaning making, fosters belonging. Or offering kind of multisensory experiences that center on art is kind of a hallmark of our programming. So I want to finish kind of focusing on that and how that affects accessibility, inclusion for all audiences with and without disabilities. First, why would we offer, why is this important? Why create opportunities for engaging with art through different senses in any type of experience in the museum? So a few reasons. Every sense offers different types of information. Some senses are good at some things and not so good at others. And we get different types of information from, for example, when we look versus when we touch. So one sense isn't a substitute for another. They all give us different information. Learning through the senses, other than vision and hearing, which are kind of the predominant senses that we think of using in a museum, that's essential for some people. Redundancy of information through different senses, kind of reinforcing information through different senses, can help people with, for example, learning disabilities or cognitive impairments, dementia, as long as we don't overload with too much sensory stimulation all at once. And of course, multisensory experiences can help everybody. So to connect, to engage. So programming is really more inclusive when designed with this type of sensory engagement in mind, and also offers that important those important options for different ways to participate. So if you want to identify as someone with a disability, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. We're doing these things anyway. People can choose preferences based on preferences or access needs. For example, movement is good at helping people understand spatial relationships, stories, emotions, and even artistic processes. So here are examples from different programs for different audiences in these images. For on the top right, for kids who are blind or partially sighted, acting out characters in a mural painting, or in the middle image in our Seeing Through Drawing workshop, using one's body to conceptualize the size of a painting. Below in our Discoveries program for people with developmental and learning disabilities and autism, using movement to kind of understand this Boccioni sculpture that is very much about movement through space. And then I have a screenshot from a program, our Memory Cafe for people with dementia, in which we're stretching, which is a component of the physical movement is a component of those activities, those online activities as well, to get the blood flowing, help people connect with others. You see that others are doing the same activity. And movement is, can also be really integral in different ways. So here, our drawing class for people who are blind or partially sighted, Seeing Through Drawing, where we're drawing from a verbal description that focuses on movement at the top, or drawing movement from touch. So touching a sculpture and then responding to that with mark making that represents movement. The sense of touch is central in many of our programs too. And I mentioned how, really kind of designing the tactile experience with those differences in mind. So touch is immediate, requires physical contact, right? It's sequential. You can't get this global view that you get when you look at something. It's active. So you're active, so it can help to focus attention. For example, if you're touching and looking at the same time, you're moving your hand across a tactile diagram, for example, or across a sculpture. We also use smell in a number of programs, and smell is a sense that is sometimes compromised for people with dementia, but it's an option. It's an option to imagine smell in a program, to create smell or scents by combining different scents to create a fragrance, to think about how, an object, how smell fits into the narrative, the history of an object. For example, an incense burner in our Islamic collection is a work of art that where we talk about smell, and maybe even have an opportunity to smell what might have been burned in that incense burner. And we like to combine these sensory experiences for for different audiences. This was a drop-in evening, Friday evening event when the museum is open late. We brought in a sommelier, we had wine tasting. People were invited to note the smells and the tastes that they experienced. What words would they use to describe those smells and tastes of the wine? And then we paired those with works of art. So they followed up with a tour in the galleries and used their placemats with their notes to see if they could kind of connect using that cross-sensory vocabulary to, connect to the works of art in the tours. And just a little more, a few more examples in programming for people who are blind or partially sighted here, different ways of using touch. I show here a tactile graphic of, we had an artist in residence from the Pacific Islands we did a tactile graphic of her tattoos, and she was explaining the significance of each. And this is a program that took place in our Oceania, Arts of Oceania galleries. And then we touch original works of art and sometimes reproductions in the galleries and in more intimate classroom settings, sometimes with gloves, sometimes without gloves, but always really focusing on what touch can tell us about an object. So regardless of disability, we can get new information through touch. In Seeing Through Drawing, a drawing class for people who are blind or partially sighted, we're also considering things that might be adaptations or design elements for participants who might also have some cognitive impairment, dementia. So thinking again about that idea of redundancy of information, giving instructions in a way that's not overwhelming, right? It's one step at a time, offering those choices and different ways to connect at physical, sensory, and cognitive stimulation that others have mentioned. Similarly, in workshops for kids, teens, and adults with learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, and autism. I know the terminology is different in the UK, but these are really multi or intergenerational workshops where everyone participates together. So that multisensory engagement and flexibility of strategies that are used to engage people are, crucial here. It's very much a community, a co-created community of participants and educators, teaching artists that's evolved over time. And so, we are kind of making meaning together. I think it was Rashmi who was talking about that. And also, creating an experience that's going to be hopefully accessible to everyone, which involves a lot of experimentation. Some things don't work. Let us know. We'll try something else. And just to kind of mention that we have programs in American Sign Language, which are also engaging multiple senses, art making, touch. We have a training program for deaf educators. So we're also looking at, when we're training people to become museum educators, incorporating teaching with smell, with touch, how to incorporate those in a setting which is ASL, American Sign Language led. And in summary, for people with dementia and their care partners, we have Metascapes, which is in person now, back in person in the museum. And we have what we call Met Memory Cafe, which is currently virtual. And really the goals of those programs are very much in line what others have already talked about. This idea of, creating a space where everyone is comfortable. People, we have a lot of opportunity for social engagement, for making new friends, sharing experiences, hopefully having a positive impact on caregiver burden and isolation, giving that opportunity to just be in the moment and to focus on what's in front of us. Moving around the museum, we get that physical exercise and cognitive and social stimulation that you know, hopefully contributes to improved quality of life for everyone involved, including the educators. And here's some examples. This was on the top left, an art making workshop, which is for Metascapes, where we had a jazz trio. And we were looking at works of art inspired by jazz. The musicians were playing as people were making. They played music that was familiar to people. And then they also, they actually improvised by using the works of art that people were making. They used them as kind of a graphic score and played their artwork. So the two art forms were kind of riffing off of each other, which was great fun. And I'm happy to talk about any of this more later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I can see from the exchange in the chat that people have found particularly the multi-sensory descriptions and the work that you do really, really fascinating. So again, I hope we get a chance to explore that. But I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, who is Farah Syed. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And Farah is an artist, an educator, and a colour energy specialist, and works in the visual arts. Welcome.
Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you to all speakers so far. It's been so inspiring to hear you all, and it's just wonderful, you know, hearing about all the programs that are available for people. So I'm going to share my screen, and basically I am Farah Syed, an artist and educator, and I'm based in London. I have always been very passionate about making art accessible to all. And it has been a real journey to be able to share it with people in different ways, because I have always been very focused on making art inclusive, because we all need to be able to experience the enrichment that art can offer us. And I have had great and wonderful experiences from people all over the world to see how art transcends barriers of language, culture, disabilities, age, gender. Art connects us immediately, it really does. So I offer a multi-sensory art experience, and I have seen results in many formats as to how it is very, very beneficial in a therapy sense, in an empowering sense, and just improving our health mentally and physically in many ways. So I have worked with many organizations globally, RNIB, Vision Australia, and across the Far East, and in many organizations in the UK as well. And recently I did a workshop with A.R.T.S, which was very interesting because it showed a different perspective, where if you have the opportunity to shut down one of your senses, you learn a lot more about what people who don't have those senses in their day-to-day life, what they experience, how things can be made more accessible to them, how things can be designed to be more accessible to them. So working with A.R.T.S was quite enlightening, that you can I'm able to share with people a different perspective from which we can learn a lot. So a lot of valuable data was gathered from not just that experience, but also from all of my workshops that I have delivered globally, because I, at each workshop, collect data. And it has been fascinating to learn from these workshops. As somebody previously mentioned, different programs that are offered are educational for the participants, but also for those people delivering the workshops. I have learned a lot, for which I am very, very grateful, from all the participants that I have worked with in many, many organizations in many cities globally. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And that has also empowered me and educated me to be able to deliver more in-depth workshops to people and tailor them for specific needs for each workshop. So one of the things that I would like to focus on is the format of my workshop. So I realize that there's a lot to share with people, and then I do focus on those people who are blind or partially sighted. So my work, but I tailor the workshop for people with varied additional needs. So the workshop that I deliver is in 3 separate parts. The first section is feeling, textures and movement on a canvas. So each canvas that I create, I've created many canvases for workshops specifically that have a varying amount of textures that are interesting for people to experience using the sense of touch. So in each workshop, I have a variety of people with needs in terms of sight. Some are completely blind, some are partially sighted. So it's an interesting perspective to hear what different people experience on the canvases. I then show people how to feel color energy without the need for sight. So we can actually all do that. I'll mention a bit more about that in a moment, but it's wonderful to share that technique with people where we can actually physically feel color energy without the need for sight. And it's been wonderful hearing the empowering responses from people when they are when they realize that they can actually do it. We can all do it, by the way. And then the third section of my workshop is where we create textured art together. So I provide a range of textures which are available for people to choose what they want to put onto a canvas, with a variety of colors, which they could also go in depth if they want to have warm colors and cool colors. But the whole purpose of this is to empower people to know that even if they can't see what they're doing, they can absolutely create art, and then they can have the pleasure of being able to share that art with their family and friends. And I cannot explain in words the emotional feeling that I get when I see people feel so happy that they can do this, that they've been given the opportunity to do this. During many of my workshops in various countries, I have had feedback from people where they have said, and coming from a perspective of somebody who's blind, they've said to me, nobody has ever bothered to ask us about art, let alone give us the opportunity to experience art using the sense of touch. And they have felt very grateful and empowered and enriched to have these experiences. And for me, it is just full of joy, and that's what keeps me going and has just made me think this is something that needs to be on offer and available on a much wider scale in all countries where people do need accessibility to arts. Some countries have more facilities, some don't, and that's what my passion is, to make sure everybody has accessibility to art. And that's what I'm very, very grateful to be able to do. So I have had a lot of feedback about the aspect of showing people how to feel color energies without the need for sight. And just a very brief explanation is that colors have a varying wavelength of frequency depending on the color and the shade of the color. So dark colors absorb a lot more energy, therefore they emit a higher frequency of heat and energy that we can actually physically feel. In comparison to, say, perhaps a light blue or a white, they absorb a lower frequency of energy, which means that they emit a lower frequency of heat. Well, it's more of a cooler energy, but we can absolutely differentiate between these two energy emissions with our eyes closed, or if somebody who is blind. So at my workshops, it has been wonderful to see somebody who is astounded that they can actually physically feel the difference between colors. And then going deeper, I am able to show people how to feel shades of color depending on the frequencies that we have or displayed onto the canvases. So each canvas that I create for the workshops have cool areas and warm areas, and those are very, very easy to differentiate. And as I said, it's wonderful to see how people feel so excited the fact that they can actually do this. And I deliver my programs to various institutions and for people with additional needs, including the older generation, where there are aspects of dementia and other situations that they're dealing with. But it's a range. But it's just wonderful to share this with people, because it's something that they probably most of the time have never heard about, and then they take it further. And I do deliver programs which go more in depth in terms of the color, in terms of feeling color energy. So my workshop findings have been fascinating, as I said, to me and to the people who I work, the organizations that I work with. So I have a lot of data which shows various correlations between people's reactions to the workshop, different aspects of the workshop. And I have time and time again seen how art improves mental, physical, and emotional health. It's astounding to see something as simple as an interaction with art, how that can make such a positive impact on people, not just as is mentally and emotional health, but physical health. There's a lot to discuss on this, but obviously we have a limited time here. And how to utilize the power of color in everyday life, and how color can improve our mood. So I talk about that in workshops as well. So as I said before, breaking down the barriers of various things like language, age, culture, disability through art is a beautiful thing. And that's just so wonderful to share that with people in many countries, and to also work in schools as well and various organizations. But it's just so empowering to see the power of art making positive impacts on many people. So, it's just a real privilege to be able to do that with people. So I've had many testimonials in various workshops. I've just shown a few here where I'll just read one out. So the workshop was exciting and exhilarating. I didn't think I'd be able to feel the color on the canvas, but to my surprise, I could easily feel the warm and cool areas. Somebody else, and that's somebody from Visions, workshop I did with Visions in New York, a participant in Malaysia with the Malaysian Association for the Blind had said that I learned that blind people can also paint using their own creativity, and found that color has energy too. And finally, the testimonial here shows a participant from the Hong Kong Association for the Blind, and he said, really felt the energies and colors and appreciated the chance to create art for the first time ever. I loved being part of this amazing workshop. So, these are, a few testimonials that give you an idea of how empowering and how people feel when they do the workshops that I offer, and how it's left a lasting impression. And it also encourages people to go ahead and continue to create and experience art. So here are my details of how to get in touch, etc. But I just want to clarify how art empowers all. Art should be accessible to all, and there should be more programs available in museums and galleries and various institutions where people can access art in all formats. And it's wonderful to be on this event where it's just, I'm hearing from so many people that that's what you're doing, and I'm happy to help if anyone needs to reach out. And congratulations on everything that everyone is doing on here. That's it from me.
Thank you, Farah. This first video is from Dr. Beverly, I may not pronounce the surname right, Dugid, who is the founder of Insight Mind, and this is about poetry for the visually impaired.
Hello, my name is Dr. Beverly Dugid, and I'm here today to talk to you about Insight Mind, which is an initiative I started 2 years ago to teach creative courses for mind, body and soul. So what I mean by that is courses that will help you relax and also learn meditation and also learn mindful movement as well. A big part of this is mindful poetry, courses which I developed and are still developing to help you write poetry and also just have fun with words. So I teach predominantly marginalised and underrepresented groups. This is so because these are the most marginalised people in our society. And so also I teach through my own lived experience of having glaucoma, which means I have partial sight. So yes, I started this, like I said, 2 years ago. The first course I developed was Mindful Poetry for Visually Impaired People, which is an 8-week course, and also a 4-week course as well, which I've just taught this summer. And yeah, so it's been very successful. The feedback has been really, really positive, and I've passed over to Veronica, sorry, a booklet which my class produced, with some of their poetry and artwork. So the course is really, how I teach is very adaptive and inclusive, which is my main aim. So I talk to people, particularly my visually impaired students. We talk about how they want to write, first of all, because we talk about journaling and how do you want to do that as a visually impaired person. So some people will use Braille, some people will want to write digitally, some people still write with pen, but not everybody can do that. So we talk about the issues they've had in other classes where they weren't given the time to explore those different issues. So, so first of all, I give people the space to do that. So what are the accessible formats? How do they want to write? And what's most easiest for them to write in the class? And it's really a big discussion we have at the beginning. So we get rid of that, and then people want to come along the next session and learn poetry from that, once they feel comfortable about writing in their own format. So people sometimes use voiceover as well. So that's an example where voiceover is something you might have on your smartphone or your Apple phone, and it reads out the screen. So it can also read out your own work for you. So you'll dictate it or type it, and then you can listen to it back to make sure that it sounds okay. You can get a mechanical voice reading it back, but that is better than nothing to some people, because it helps them to hear what the poetry sounds like, and then they can read it themselves. And it calls for a lot of memorization of their work, but that's another skill that visually impaired people have developed, that they have quite good memories to be able to remember their own work without having it in front of them. So then the second bit of the course is where we go on to write poetry, and we talk about all the things that you would talk about in a mainstream class and try to foster all of that, but we just do it in slightly different ways sometimes and have to be inventive. So people will, I teach about metaphor, imagery, similes, all those different things that you use to write poetry. But then I ask people who haven't seen before, or maybe haven't written poetry before, how they get in touch with imagery. If you haven't been able to visualize in your mind before or see around you, it's a bit difficult how you want to write things down. So I use sounds. So we then go into the senses, and this is where my second course came in, about developing the senses to write poetry. So people will then, I would then give people a series of prompts to help them write. So normally prompts are quite visual, but within my course the prompts are sound or touch or smell. And so we use different things to help people to write their poetry, which are very different, and it adds to having quite a dynamic class where I give people find an object to write about, and it can evoke memory as well. And again, leads to quite exciting work where people think, oh, I didn't think I could do this before because I couldn't imagine before, or I can't think about what something looks like. So they can, think about it. And then some people begin to think about colour, and they've never seen colour before, so they think about how they can write about colour. So it lends to a very interesting and dynamic class. That's telling me that my 5 minutes are up, but just to let you know that if you want to get in touch or like any of what I've said, you can contact me on admin@insightmind.co.uk.
Okay, I am going to introduce the next video, and this is a video by Jan Bert van der Burg, who is the director of Art Think in Edinburgh and the Lothians.
Right. Hello, my name is Jan Bert van der Burg, and I'm the director of Art Think in Edinburgh. I'm going to very briefly talk about the ways in which we support disabled people to access the arts in Edinburgh and surrounding areas. What you can see behind me is the Red Note Ensemble performing. And they're performing on a large blue wedge, which also transmits the sound as vibration. What happens is that sound is transposed into vibrations, and people can experience that music in a completely different way. The blue wedge was inspired by work that we were doing in a day centre for people with complex disabilities, where we looked at different ways in which we could engage people, where their perceptions were as important as the ones that the artist brought, and where the collaborations developed in a way where equality was achieved. It took a long time. It takes a long time. It took us about 20 years to get to this point. The Blue Wedge is situated, or was situated, at the tramway in Glasgow, a large exhibition space, where we also had a huge tower that blew bubbles and smoke. We had a massive silk which blew in the wind and then also transmitted sound. It was a multi-dimensional and multi-sensory way of engaging with people. All that work was inspired by the people that we'd worked with over a long period of time, and where we had made real efforts to understand different sensibilities, different ways of thinking, and different ways of being. I think that's an incredible achievement. It's also an incredible way of thinking about the arts in a slightly different way, from a slightly different direction, from a slightly different perspective. Really, really important for us, but I think for all of us, to think about how people not only access the arts, but also how they engage with it and how they direct us to achieve different things, to achieve different ways of experiencing what is around us, and different ways of thinking. What's been interesting in this particular example is that actually those who worked in health and social care got it very quickly. They knew it was contemporary art space, they knew they were occupying an exhibition as such, but they also understood where that exhibition had come from. And what was more interesting for us is then how we made sure that people would engage with it, how we made sure that they had the time to really experience this. And we did this not only by having an exhibition there, but also by performances of contemporary classical music, dance, but also of different types of experiences, things that we knew would appeal to people. And that included an Elvis impersonator, it included an opera singer, it included the contemporary dance company that's based at the tramway. So a whole loads of different ways of getting people to respond, to engage, and to participate. What we created was something quite special. We created something where everybody could enjoy and engage with the exhibition on their terms. Not something that I've seen that often, but also not something that should be unique. And I think with that thought, I'll leave you, because actually this should be what we should all be able to experience. And I think from my point of view, it is something that after 20, 30 years, we have finally achieved. I thank you for listening, and hopefully what I've said has been informative to you. If you want to find out more, please visit our website or get in touch with us. Our website is artlinkedinburgh.co.uk. Thank you.
Okay, and we arrive at our last speaker before our panel debate. I would like to introduce Ruth Fabi, who is the Director of Disability Arts, Kamran.
Hello everyone, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me to come. Fascinating to hear the talks, and lovely to see some people I've known for quite some time in the room as well. My name is Ruth Fabi. I'm a white woman in my early 60s with dark, longish, curlyish hair, going grey, wearing a green top with my bookcase behind me. I'm the Director of Disability Arts Cymru. Cymru is the Welsh name for Wales, and we have our own language and our own culture here, and we really are supporting artists to really make it in the sector. When I started this job just 3 years ago, I was the director of A.R.T.S, formerly Northwest Disability Arts Forum, and before that, Full Circle Arts in Manchester. So I've been around a long time in disability arts. What's been great is how we've seen the sector change. Our work actually was formed through the movement to get our voices heard in society, and the arts were the vehicle that was our weapon for change, our weapon for activism, our weapon to challenge the ableism. Sorry, I'll slow down. I've got a signer working with me. I do apologise. I get very excited about the work I do. And it's been excited because that political start to our work became quite active and quite demonstrative in very political ways. And it's why we've got these conversations today, because disabled people were fed up being talked about or done to. We have to change the narrative around disability and call out the inequalities around ableism and the fact that, particularly in the arts sector, very few of us are in positions of leadership. And hearing Nabil talking about that earlier, setting up Grey Eye, that's very much the same model we had with setting up A4D, because we just didn't see artists getting a break into the spaces where we all need to be seen, where we can affect change by having ourselves seen. One of the great quotes we had in A4D was, this festival reflects my reality. And it's so important our reality is seen throughout society. So A4D has done its thing and it continues in Liverpool. I'm now in Wales, working with a membership organisation to bring change, supporting those members who are self-disclosing as disabled or deaf or neurodivergent artists across Wales. It's a free service we offer them. If people want to join us from outside, they can for £10 a year. But we do a lot of activities to support them. But the big thing we do is really institute that strategic change by delivering equality training, but also initiatives and arts programmes that will make more and more opportunities for the artists to work in the sector. When I first started in 2019, the Arts Council of Wales showed only about 2% of artists self-disclosed as disabled people. It's gone up to 8%, but if we're going to reflect the fact that 25% of the population of Wales are disabled and deaf people, we need to actually be seen more in those places. Now, one of the big things that's a myth about our lives as disabled people is we're all born with them. Most of us acquire our impairments. Only about 14% of us actually are born with our impairments. So disability is normal. It's every day. It's going to be you're disabled or you're not disabled yet if you live long enough. So we need to have a narrative and a discussion about bringing that into the fore. So one of the big things we've just finished last week was a programme called Galwad, where we used radical inclusion principles to embed actors and writers and technicians and young people who were disabled people in that work. I'm putting all the links in the chat so you can look us up. But one of the big things we did One of the big things we did last year was develop a manifesto to present to the Welsh Government called Bring Us Our Creative Rights. And that's where I see the conversation has changed for us as disabled artists across the country. It's about our rights to be included, our rights to be in the places where we're often ignored or left out and forgotten about. And we put 9 demands there, and the Welsh Government have accepted them, following the United Convention for the Rights of Disabled People, the social model of disability, that we are subject to an ableist society, and we need to call that out alongside racism and sexism and the other isms which affect our intersectionality, because we're never tidy in one place. So I hope I've given you enough of our work, but don't forget to get in touch with us if you need to find out a bit more. But thank you for letting me be part of this important conversation today.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And again, you know, there's a whole subject in there around intersectionality as well.
Can I kick off? It's Veronica. I wanted to ask people to think about the stigma issue and whether people who are disabled people, whether by being very proud and to identify as disabled in the right sense, whether when dementia hits, that might be they might feel less of a stigma than if you had no disability to cope with, and one was and then suddenly hit with the idea of a brain degenerating. It's something that cropped up during the preparation for talking to the speakers. I just wondered what each one thought about stigma when you're disabled, whether it was less if a disabled person got dementia than a non-disabled person getting a dementia. If that's the awful word, I shouldn't use non-disabled, but you know what I mean.
Can I answer that? It's Ruth here, because it has been really interesting for me. I started wearing hearing aids at 6 after being labelled as educationally subnormal, then realising it was actually a hearing thing I was dealing with, and that my engagement from that point on really impacted the rest of my life. And I found the arts was the first time I got to find a voice, something I could do and feel proud of. And then I found the social model and the disability movement, and it radically changed how I saw myself. I was no longer that burden. And I realized a lot of the language about the stigmatization of being deaf and I can't is always from a deficit. So it has been something that really interests me. As I've got older and acquired more impairments, it is interesting how you change and shift the narrative around your life. But actually, I say I've got a deafness gain, not a hearing loss. And as I can't move as much because of my lung condition, and my mobility impairment has given me a new way of being liberated in a wheelchair when I need to use that. So changing that conversation is really important. I know in Liverpool, we did an intergenerational project at a sheltered accommodation. Many people were becoming disabled with young disabled kids to do writing, and they were discovering new ways of seeing themselves as disabled people, acquiring impairments later. It's not exactly the context of dementia, but actually the conversation doesn't always have to be about tragedy, suffering. We can't. It needs to change and challenge that, and words are important, that we use words that can do that.
Thank you, Ruth. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on sort of the difference in acquiring a disability or developing dementia later in life? I mean, my own reflection is, most people don't have just one disability. People tend to have more than one disability and different impairments, and each one, has its own opportunities and its own challenges. And I think it very much depends on the type of disability you have, the type of environment that you're in, the type of support that you have. And one of my worries as guardian to my brother, who's not, as I said, is non-verbal and severely disabled, I have a massive fear of around aging and disability, because he won't be able to communicate what is happening or how he's feeling and so on. So I do think there's a whole subject of study and that we need to better understand around aging and disability, particularly people with complex needs.
Can I just add to that, Rashmi? I totally agree with what you're saying. And coming from a perspective of an Asian background, there are a lot of cultural aspects to address as well, because I've seen it myself, where there's stigmas, that people are embarrassed to talk about it, and they don't have the support. A lot of people from various ethnic backgrounds don't have the support network where somebody can be open and honest about their additional needs. And definitely in the older generation in the Asian community, there is a big issue of admitting or of anybody feeling comfortable to say they have dementia or they have Alzheimer's, etc. And I'm coming from a perspective where my mother has early stage dementia, and there are a lot of complex issues going on right now. So I think cultural backgrounds, especially with the Asian community that I have experienced, there are issues that do need to be addressed. And if there's more support, that would be really, really helpful.
Thank you, Farah. That's not actually what I meant. What I mean is when you have, because we know sadly about stigma in altogether with dementia, but I just meant that when you are living with a disability and then experience dementia, whether experiencing dementia you sense less of the stigma that a person who simply is experiencing dementia, you immediately, there is always this even shame that people experience with dementia. They shouldn't do, but they can do. But what I'm really meaning is that if you already live with a disability and you have coped brilliantly with it, do people who live who then get a form of dementia find it find themselves more able to focus on actually dealing with the dementia rather than worrying about this, worrying about the stigma. Rebecca's just come.
Yes, thank you. I think it depends, you know, people's own changes to the way they see themselves and their own personal identities are not held in a vacuum. And so an important variable there is going to be the way in which one society or culture perceives dementia and, you know, the experience of dementia. So it's all very wound up together also with aging in general and the way we perceive aging, and the kind of acquisition of disability. So I don't think you can kind of separate them, but I love what Ruth said about having kind of discovered the social model and being able to, you know, have a way to kind of recontextualize your own experience as a disabled person and possibly, you know, apply that to, you know, the changes that one experiences when they have dementia. Very interesting.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Veronica is sort of putting it more delicately, but putting it crudely, no, you know, personally, I don't think just because you have a disability, it's easier to deal with another type of disability, and they're all very different. And I think we all experience stigma, and, you know, if you look at our protected characteristics, you know, people experience stigma and unequal treatment in very different aspects of their lives. So it's, you know, it's not something, you know, people have talked about intersection as well, going back to Farah's point, but that can be gender, it can be sexuality, it can be all sorts of things. And then there are social inequalities that also impact, you know, our lived experience. So there are so many complicating factors in how
I just think quite simply, people are proud, sometimes are proud to identify as living with a disability.
I wanted to speak to the stigma issue because I think it is about the feeling of empowerment, and that comes from so many different factors in a person's life. So being able to face a diagnosis, perhaps it might be dementia in this case, comes from so many different factors in your background and in the culture and community that you live in. And I think that the narrative, as people have been talking about, narratives around disability are also so stigmatizing around the narratives of dementia. And when my partner and I, John, who had dementia, he said, we're out and proud with dementia. And that's made a big stir, not only in our family, but in the community. How can you be out and proud with a disability of that kind? So I think we need to really be speaking out about the ways in which dementia can be an asset to the community and not a deficit.
I think one of the interesting things that's a sort of thread that's run through a lot of speakers has been this sense of community, and the role of the arts in connecting people and bringing people together versus the isolation one might feel whether living with dementia or someone with a disability. Again, would people like to share reflections? I may not have captured everything, but just a very, very brief summary that things that stood out for me was the idea of community and the role of the arts, both in terms of the practical, obvious benefits when it comes to physical health, but also the social benefits and an almost philosophical, existential, in terms of understanding, you know, the arts helping us understand ourselves and understanding the world around us, or ourselves in the world. When we were talking about systems and the social model of disability, quite a few people talked about dependence, independence, interdependence, and that seems really critical. And people talked about the value of the arts also just in terms of transcending boundaries, so transcending boundaries of language. We talked about different ways of learning and experiencing the arts, the multisensory experience, the power of stories and narrative. And I think that was very striking and really, you know, interesting ways that colleagues have shared around learning and developing. And I think there was a lot of talk around advocacy, disability justice, challenging perceptions, both external perceptions, but our own perceptions in what we think is possible and how we adapt and transpose the work that we do when it comes to delivering the arts. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, which came up in fragments, and we didn't talk about it quite in this way, but when we were talking about social prescribing and the different elements of delivering the arts and artistic practice, is around a sort of whole system change. So this isn't just about doing art better or doing it more inclusively. It's about all the other factors around us. You know, it's about social attitude, it's about our environment, it's about transport, it's about you know, the support that we have. You know, it's about stigma. But there are so many aspects that we, particularly because there are a lot of practitioners here that may not have direct influence over, but are so critical into the effectiveness of how we deliver.
It has been such a privilege to have you, Rashmi, as our chair. Your informed, wise guidance all the way through has shone so much, so strongly in every aspect, that thank you very, very much for coming to chair at the last minute, and we were just so lucky to have you. And thank you to our signers. You really have done wonderful things for us all. And our speakers, my goodness me, what a lot of experience you've shared and a lot of guidance, and I can't wait to hear all this again and type it all out, and I'll try and find the links. For those of you who spoke from a text, speakers, and could you very, very sweetly email it to me? It makes it easier when transcribing, just to make sure I get the right words, and any links. And Kate, thank you for your the part that you played. And of course, Nigel, how could we have done it without you? I can't manage technology. Thank you, everyone. It's been a privilege and an exciting for Arts for Dementia. I believe they want to take it further. So thank you indeed.